Well, let's see if this is going to work this time when I try to do the horizontal orientation. So it might take me a minute just to double check everything here and make sure it's happening the way it's supposed to. Yes, I think we did it this time, and you notice what I've done there. Okay, let's bring this up. All right. Wearing my one of my Harley shirts. I have like, oh gee, over the years when I had my Harleys, I'll bet you I have 100 Harley shirts. Normally from everywhere that my wife and I rode to at the time, Carol or me by myself. So I wear them often because they're high quality. They look nice, but I don't have a Harley anymore. Just so you all know. All right. Okay. I put up that post this morning when I was out and about doing things, and I am really upset right now, as most of you can probably imagine, because all the promises that have been made to us were all lies, all to set us up, all to get us behind a supposed Trump who has been so persecuted by all sorts of people in government and in the private sector and all these pretenses about him being shot and all this stuff, which I don't believe any of it anymore. It was all to make him look like, as I've said for a long time, the suffering servant of Isaiah 52:53. And I put up as the thumbnail one of the proofs of this, as far as who he thinks he is and wants to be, with the twin messiahs, Netanyahu, Bibi, and himself on that coin, where it talks about them being the sons of light fighting the sons of darkness, which is horse manure. Okay, so you know how I feel about this. You know what I've been saying since 2017. Okay, he's sacrificed people to his God, which isn't the God that all of the Abrahamic religions are corrupted. I've said that for a long time, but it's very obvious that he and Bibi worship a God that they pretend is the same God that you worship, but it isn't. The closest thing to it would be probably Shamyaza, or as you would know him, Lucifer or Moloch, Baal at the very least. They've substituted the true God for their God and then have done all of this destruction, okay? And it's going to get worse. Maybe Bibi led him into this, sucked him in, okay? But it's like I said the other day, in order to be hypnotized, you have to agree to be hypnotized. It doesn't just happen because of some whoop-de-doo abracadabra. You have to be willing. So he's been willing and complicit in all this. Bibi today fled Tel Aviv, flew out of Israel, the coward that he is. They'll try to say, well, he's just trying to run the war from a more safe location. Horse hockey. He fled, and he went to Cyprus first to try to land there. They refused his jet. They would not let him land there. So where did he go? From all that I can gather at this point, he's landed in Berlin. Germany is going to protect him, I guess. The point is, he didn't stay in Israel to lead this holy war against Iran from amidst his own people like a true leader would. No, he took off, and he's going to allow the Israelis to suffer his stupid ass decisions, his attempts to show that he's the great Mashiach. Well, do you see where this is? So he's left the country. Jews in New York, I understand, are parading through the streets with their Mashiach flag saying the Mashiach has arrived. He's coming now. So my estimation is this. I don't know how this entire war over Iran is going to end up. It could backfire on Bibi and Trump. It can, very easily. I'm not predicting that. I don't know how this is going to turn out. When you unleash these kinds of things, one thing I learned as a military officer, you unleash these types of things and you don't really control them. The unknown can happen. The real God could step in, for one thing. But what I think Bibi is trying to do here is not just escape the destruction so he can save his own skin, but so that he can return if and when Israel wins this war and be the great return of the great and lauded Mashiach. That's what I think is his plan is here. He has to leave in order to return. Do you see what I'm saying? So not only did he flee to save his skin, but so that he can return and be the great Mashiach. What's he going to do with Trump? Well, it's like I've said for a long time. These are two mafiosos. They're both criminals, but they have to agree to some extent in order to accomplish their purposes. So, what they're going to do, in my estimation, is if this thing goes the way they both plan, then one of two things will happen. Either Trump will become the Messiah, one of the messiahs over this area of the world and Bibi over the other, until at some point Bibi decides to take over it all and then does away with Trump, which could happen in any number of ways, not necessarily his demise, okay? But neither one of them are going to share, no matter who wins on this thing, neither one of them is going to share power with the other, not in the long run. So, as I've often explained to people, I've been in this study for over 4 decades. When I read the Torah, the Tanakh, and especially the Talmud or medieval Kabbalah, which I don't go along with at all, Moses de Leon and the Zohar, the Lurianic Kabbalah, all of that, no, I have no use for it. My understanding of the true Jewish mysticism was becoming knowledgeable of the attributes of God himself and trying to bring those attributes into yourself. Not destruction, there are two paths as I've long explained. I've studied this stuff for too long to not know what the real intent is in the Tanakh, and it's talking about the supremacy of one group. It wasn't intended that way, but that's how the language was manipulated by the scribes and by subsequent people who were translating it. And I'm not going to get into the whole detail on this. To now say, and it's certainly taught this way now by almost all the rabbis, at least the ones in Israel, and there are exceptions. There are always exceptions. But the idea of the chosen people is that they've been chosen to be the examples to the world. No, that's not how they look at it. They look at it as the chosen as being, they are two things. They are the Messiah without metaphor, and they are God on earth. That is how they look at it. So, Bibi fled. He's not leading his people. He's gone off to hide in some other place, trying to avoid getting taken out by Iran and Iran. I'm going to say it correctly. I think that's correct. Iran and its people, its agents, who might as well also be in Israel doing the same thing that Mossad and Israeli IDF agents are doing in Iran. He knows they're there. So he's gotten out of there. But I also think it's because if this is successful, he can do the drama, as I've said, of the Mashiach arriving back in Israel. And if that happens, he will head to the Mount of Olives and to the Temple Mount and do his thing. Just laying it out, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't bring my glasses, so I don't think I can read what's going on in the chat. I thought you were gone. Oh, not well. Okay, you want me to leave, Mean Gene? Yes, I was gone. I didn't want to do this. I was dragged back into this, not because I chose it, but because of some things that happened about 2 months ago. And silence is agreement. So I had to come back under certain circumstances because, as I said, I can even listen to the rabbis talking about this who are not pro-Israel, that are not pro-Zionist. At least that's what they say. But there are problems in the Jewish mindset itself, which I try not to get into because I think it's probably not good to come after everybody with a broad brush. But I understand those people who say, why do you separate the Jews from Zionism? Even the Jews that say they aren't Zionists, there's a problem in their theology. And I agree. I agree. But at the same time, I understand that all, as I've said, all the Abrahamic religions are corrupted. All of them. Christianity is just as corrupt in so many ways as Judaism and Islam and all of the different sects involved. But people don't want to hear that. And I think, because I've known Jews for a long time. I've been studying under them for a long, long time. Some have said, as I've mentioned before, that their goal is to kick everybody off the planet but themselves. You know what that means, right? Then I know other Jews who say we're supposed to teach the godly way. And I think they're serious. But there's a problem in the Tanakh. There's a problem in the Torah. And there's this problem that they think chosen means supremacy and that they can annihilate everybody but themselves. It is there. Okay? Call everybody Amalek that disagrees with them in theology or politics. It's there. The movement of the Ark of the Covenant by David, I think, is a farce in the scriptures. That he would move it from Shiloh to Jerusalem because God wanted him to. No, that was a political move, if in fact it really happened that way. Jeremiah 8:8 even talks about the scribes lying. Jeremiah was probably quoted a lot. When I look at the supposed quotes from Jesus, there's Jeremiah in there in a lot of places. The problem with the sacrifices, although it says that in Hosea too, that God doesn't want those sacrifices. He didn't order them. Look, I could talk this religion all day long, and I have. I have entire YouTube videos and some X-posts, quite a few X-posts, explaining what it's really about, what's going on here. The kingdom of heaven is within you, and if you hear that little conscience in your heart say, this isn't good, you better listen to it and not try to use your brain to go along with what's happening in the world, because it's not right. The kingdom of heaven really is within you. And if that's the case, then it brings, as I've said once before, then it brings an entirely different meaning to the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, in our bodies, as it is in heaven, in our conscience, in our connection to God. Not just what happens in the world as far as, the political establishments are concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, Netanyahu, the Israelis, Zionists, and Trump have proven who their God is. Do I trust the Islamic Republic of Iran? Do I trust Islam? No. All Abrahamic religions are corrupted. But the fact of the matter is, historically and theologically, Islam is closer to the actual Christianity of the first century than modern Christianity is, and certainly has no ties to Judaism, other than it sprang from there. I could explain that the Quran talks about Jesus and venerates him, and even his mother Mary. They believe that he is a Messiah of sorts, not the Mahdi. Judaism doesn't believe that. Judaism believes that he was a rogue preacher. And despite what people say, that the Talmud is just a commentary, it's not law. There's no judgment there. But for instance, that Jesus is now boiling in excrement in hell, right? Oh, no, we don't teach that. That's just a commentary. The rabbis are just discussing it. It's a No. Even if that's true, those Talmudic passages are quoted by Zionists and by rabbis, and I could name a whole bunch of them that you should know. They're on the internet all the time, who say that that's true, that the Talmud is quoted and is true. So they're not saying that it's just commentary, arguments, but the old statement, if you have two Jews, you've got five opinions. Okay, they're arguments, they're commentaries, they're battering these things back and forth. That might be true, but they will still quote the Talmud just like they do the Torah and say this is God's will, that all goy need to be killed or enslaved or any number of the other things that are in there. Jesus boiling in excrement. I don't believe in the Jesus of modern day Christianity. I do in the personage. I do believe in the principles of that personage. But I don't believe, as most of you know, that he had anything to do with Judaism. I believe that he was something else, and that his legacy was then absconded with by the early promoters of what became Christianity. I do believe, for instance, that the Shroud of Turin is the real guy, but he wasn't Jewish. And if he had been Jewish, if he had been born a Jew, if that happened, I don't think so, but if it did happen, his eyes were open to the wickedness and evil of that theological group and its theocracy in his day. Much like when I first came into my parents' family, they were Jehovah's Witnesses. They left the witnesses, okay? I think some of you know my history here. I didn't really have much to do with that. I was out tracting as a young boy, giving out the Watchtower and Awake and all that stuff. And then my parents left there. There was a problem, and I don't want to get into what it was, but the leaders of that organization became tyrants, basically, to my parents, and they decided to leave, okay? My mom returned to Roman Catholicism. My dad, who had been a Southern Baptist, became just, okay, I'm not anything now. I'm just gonna hang along like the sidelines. You all go try to find what you think you want. So my mom went back to Catholicism, took my brother and I with her, and I was a Catholic. Frankly, as most of you know, I am still, I guess, still a Catholic because they've never excommunicated me, all right? But in Catholicism, I did the same thing that the witnesses taught me, fortunately, and my mother, too, and my dad, to question those things. So I started questioning Catholicism. And I know Candace Owens would be really upset talking to me, okay? But at least she has the Spirit of Christ about her, I believe. And so do people like Mel, the village crazy lady, and those folks. I believe that they really do have it. They just think that they have to be tied to that organization in some way or another. But I went through Catholicism. And when I asked the questions like Jesus did in the story, when he's being questioned by the rabbis there in the temple and he has his answers, it was a back and forth, a question and answer thing. I was doing pretty much the same thing. And then I got into some other things. I touched into, as I've talked about, the Methodist religion, Hinduism, I was searching all those things. And then my mom was the one who got me involved in Mormonism, just real quick. We even got into Madame Blavatsky and all that stuff back when I was in junior high and high school. My mom was searching everything. Finally got into Mormonism, and I thought, okay, this makes sense. Although my mom did push it. I've told the story before, but I still ask those questions. And because I asked questions, the Mormon leadership started to discipline me. long before polygamy ever became an issue in my life. All right. My point is, Jesus, the person you know as Jesus, probably went through a very similar thing where he had to confront the contradictions that were presented to him, even if he was Jewish. Yeah, and I don't think he was. I think he was Samaritan, frankly. And I've talked about him being the actual Taheb that that sees that Pilate crucified. There's historical evidence of that. The other thing, not so much. All we've got is the Testimonium Flavianum in Josephus, which, if he did wrote, it was tongue in cheek, or it was put in there by the monks later or by somebody else. But regardless, Jesus stood against the. If you want to say he was Jewish, he stood against the Jewishness of his day. Much like I and other people who have rejected the corruptions in the Abrahamic religions have done. Am I patting myself on the back? No, but I can see where that would have been the situation for him. Look, what's happening right now is the pinnacle of evil. Your sons and daughters are being murdered, not by the Iranians. They're taking defensive action. They're being murdered by the leaders of Israel, Great Britain, and the United States. Because Stammer has just said they're going to join the fight against Iran. Where are the Muslim countries protecting their brothers and sisters? Are they really that easy to manipulate with money and promises? They're all corrupted, ladies and gentlemen. Don't let them fool you. They're all corrupted. They all worship Moloch, Baal, Lucifer's not his name. You know I've already said that. In the book of Isaiah, it's Halea ben Shekar. You call him Samiel, Shamyaza. There are several different names, several different possibilities. Some legendary, some made up, whatever. The evil force. That's who they worship, and we prove it. Ryan Mata did a great post today. I reposted it on X, showing not only the Jews marching around saying their Mashiach is coming now, but also talking about how corrupt and degenerate and decadent and disgustingly, horribly profane the United States is, and Israel for that matter. Israel's the hub of where they can protect the PEDs, you know. Well, we basically do that here. Everything's covered up here. The elites that have done these horrible things are protected. Oh, and gee, you know, our great FBI director, Kash Patel, is going to use his resources to make sure that we don't get attacked here and help, you know, the war overseas. Kash Patel might as well just go up and wipe Bibi's rear end. Maybe stick his. Better not say that. I'll get thrown out of here. Okay, you know where I stand on this. I want everybody to understand where I stand on this. Greg Stoker, former Army. I think he was an E5. He wasn't special forces, but he was in some special operations. There's some problems in the vocabulary there when we talk about that, but he's been very active. He went on one of the flotillas that were going to try to get relief to the Gazans, right? And he was taken hostage by the Israelis along with all those other people. However you feel about that side of things, Greg Stoker has not stood on the sidelines. And he put out a great video today as well on X and probably somewhere else where he talks about all of this. And I have to agree with him. Ryan Mata, same thing. Frankly, Stu Peters, same thing. And of course, I align very much with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I understand why she left, because she saw that there's no possibility of fixing this. It's gonna have to go down. And of course, Thomas Massey. I'm really disappointed in Rand Paul too, and there's some others. But at any rate, you know where I stand on it. I have to make it known, and I'm not going to sit on the fence here. I'm going to state what I know. Bibi's preparing. He's fled because he's a coward and he wants to play the return of the Messiah. Watch. Of course, that depends on if they actually defeat Iran or not. Maybe they won't, and then he will have to fly all around the earth forever and never find a place he can call home again because he will be a hunted man. So will Trump. Okay. That's all I got. I'm on the record now. We'll see what happens. But that's Bibi's plan. Cowardice leaving, but he pretend like he can come back and triumph as the Messiah. Been telling you this for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. It's really funny to me. I see all these people, trying to learn what's really going on, and some people have made great progress. Why don't they talk to the scholars who have studied these things outside the vanities and the control system of the religions? Why don't they do that? Why do they always have to refer to, well, supposed religious leaders? I've named scholars that should come on and talk about these things. Yes, there are scholars that will support the Israeli position too and the Zionist position. Of course there are. But you notice that the counter to that is often suppressed. Even Dr. Jonathan Adler, who I've talked about before with his book, The Origins of Judaism, had to give caveats at the beginning of his book that he believes in Judaism, but there are some problems. He couldn't just come out and talk about it. He had to be careful how he organized it and presented it because they will come after him. And they kind of have, I think, I'm pretty sure. And there have been others. When I became critical of the Mormon Church, for instance, and I started pointing out their lies and their deceptions and all of that, and it's rampant in there, and they are connected to the Charlie Kirk murder, as Candace and others have been pointing out, as well as the Utah state government. Absolutely, because they're all in the same bed. As I've been pointing these things out for years, they have caused me great difficulty. My family was destroyed because of their evil. That's all I got. Good luck, everybody. You're going to need it.